Hey, what's up, everybody? After a quick hiatus, we back to Turn Bark time. I'm the Turn.
I'm the Bark.
And we're going to be here a long time. Barker, we are on season 2. Episode 4? I had to think about that last night. Yeah, we're on episode 4. So, fun topic tonight. Barker actually texted me. You threw this out yesterday, right? Tuesday?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Tuesday, Barker threw out this great topic, kind of fun, lighthearted, but also supporting the movie industry. So, Barker, go ahead and tell us what we're talking about tonight.
Well, we're not supporting politics tonight. You get a brief reprieve as we are in the 24-hour, smack you in the face with political advertisements. I have a P.O. box and a mailbox, so I get twice the paraphernalia from all of the local, vote for, Brian Blake. Don't vote for Brian Blake. Hate to break it to him, my ballot's already counted. We're talking about our favorite historical movies. I just thought it was a good thing. Like, we're history teachers. We talk about history. Let's talk about movies. Everybody likes movies. And since, we're probably, some of us can go to the theater, but some of us can't. And you have access to the Netflix or the Amazon or Disney Plus. Well, there's not a whole lot of wealth of historical movies on Disney Plus. But you probably have some sort of streaming service that would allow you to find some movie to watch.
There's Hulu, there's Vudu, and there's probably ones that you guys know that are underground streaming services that don't work. There's also YouTube, too. YouTube has movies as well. Fun thing, though, because one of the things I didn't mention to you earlier when we were chatting is this took me right back to the summer of 2007. No. Sorry, the summer of 2011, not 7. I was a junior in 2007. I was going to be a college senior in 2011. Summer of 2011, I take a class I don't need to take, but I was like so pumped for this. I'm living in Ellensburg for the summer, and I took American history through film. And it was so cool. But we're going to tell you a little crazy thing that happened. This is back when Netflix wasn't a streaming service. You had to pick how many DVDs they would send you.
And DVDs are these flat donut-looking items that you plug into a thing called a DVD player, and then it would, you'd have to tell it to play the movie.
Yeah.
You probably see them in your schools being used by your teachers, but not in your homes.
You had to lift it. You had to, you actually had a queue like you do on Netflix now, but this queue was when you sent a DVD back, this was the next one they would send you. So I had to tell my housemates, since we all split our Netflix subscription, I was like, hey, I need one of the DVDs so that I can make sure that I'm getting my classwork done. But I got exposed to all sorts of historical movies and got to analyze them, so it was super fun. And that immediately took me back to this thing where all my roommates and I are sitting around the TV watching the historical movie that I had to watch, and they're analyzing it, and it was a really fun time. So we got 2 movies on hand, but we also want to talk about some honorable mentions first. So we won't get to our movies just yet. I have an honorable mention. My honorable mention would be the movie Miracle. 1980 U.S. hockey team takes on the Soviet Union, in the Olympics. At that point, the Russians hadn't lost a hockey game. It was like 50 years or something like that to lose a hockey game. And they had defeated our NHL players 15-0. But the coach, and now I'm drawing a blank on his name, and he's literally Herb something. What's his last name? Brain fart. Shoot. It's in my email. That's a terrible thing. It's my email thing. It's good. Great moments come from great opportunities, like you have here tonight. And then he goes on, and I can quote the whole thing. Herb Brooks is his name. And he was the coach of the hockey team, and he has a bunch of college players or former college players that are looking for a shot. And they actually, spoiler alert, defeat the Russians in the semifinals, and go on to beat Finland to win the gold medal for the U.S. team in the Olympics. One of my favorite historical movies of all time. Parker, you got an honorable mention on your plate?
I will throw out two, and my brothers will be immensely happy. I will throw out Zulu and Zulu Dawn.
Great films. Great films.
Being raised by our father, shout out to my dad. We watched a lot of different, like just a very eclectic collection of historical films. And so if you're not familiar with the Zulus, other than like the military alphabet, the Zulus are an indigenous people in Africa, South Africa. And during a time called the Boers Wars, right, the British and then eventually like the Dutch, and it's all kinds of weird mixtures down there, which is how you get Afrikaans, which isn't African, but it's Afrikaans. It sounds a lot like Dutch. But anywho, Zulu Dawn is the Battle of Island. Oh, I can't pronounce it now. Islandwana. My brother Greg will know this one better than I. But essentially, the British get defeated. The British have Henry Martini rifles, cutting-edge rifles, and they're defeated by the Zulus, who are fighting with cowhide shields and spears. And so there's some great debate about whether it was because they couldn't get the ammunition was in boxes and they could open the boxes, or was it, it was simply a matter of, didn't matter how good their technology was, there was just too many of the enemy. And so then the movie Zulu, which was made earlier, and it features, what's his name? Alfred from the Batman movies. Michael Caine. Michael Caine is in it, a young Michael Caine. About the Battle of Rorke's Drift, where British soldiers who had fallen back from Island Luwana end up at Rorke's Drift, which is a mission, and they essentially hold out. And the movie makes it great, like this great British victory, and they fought to the last, and the Zulus were so impressed they left, when in reality it was because the Zulu general wasn't supposed to attack. And at that point, one of the upper generals came by and was like, dude, what are you doing? And they're like, you shouldn't be doing that. Let's leave. And then, unfortunately, it doesn't end very well for the Zulus. But that would be my honorable mention, those two movies, just because it opens up a whole new chapter of, like, history that we explored as kids, like, things that you grew up, like, wondering about, where you're like, wait a minute, why were the British in Africa? Yeah. Where a lot of people in American education, like, we don't talk about that war. We don't talk about the Boers War here in America very much. So it's kind of an interesting little snippet to pick up growing up.
Nice. Very cool. So two movies. Unfortunately, I'm trying to figure out how to put my picture behind me, but unfortunately, that's not working right now. So I guess I'll start us off. So my movie that I chose is a more recent film. I believe it came out in 2015, but I could be wrong. It might be a little later than that. I am IMDbing it right now. Let's see. There it is. It came out in 2016. I was very close. My movie is a movie with Andrew Garfield. And Andrew Garfield plays Army medic. That was insulting to this man. He plays Navy Corpsman Desmond Doss. And Desmond Doss is a Navy corpsman. He is a conscientious subjector, meaning that he does not believe in violence. He does not touch weapons or anything like that. He's a Seventh-day Adventist. And the movie is titled Hacksaw Ridge. Basically, Desmond Doss sees an opportunity to volunteer for the military. He will not touch a gun. He won't touch a rifle. And he wants to help people. That's his goal. So he enlists to become a medic. Well, unfortunately, his courage is called into question at basic training, and he is not actually thrown in jail or the brig because they do not think that he is brave enough. They think he's cowardly. Luckily for him, he gets off on his First Amendment right, which is his religious beliefs and everything like that. We've talked about the amendments before. And he gets to go to war. And basically proves himself beyond a shadow of a doubt when making an attack on what becomes known as Hacksaw Ridge. and they climb a 400-foot cargo net to the top of this escarpment, and their job is to clear the Japanese. If you know anything about World War II and Japanese island hopping techniques, the Japanese dig in, tunnel underground so that Navy bombardments cannot destroy them or anything like that. The group moves forward, and the Japanese kind of pop out of the tunnel system that they have, their earthworks, and start attacking the Marines and overrun them to the point where everybody is being run off this cliff. They're all climbing down this cargo net as fast as they can. Private Desmond Doss is still on the escarpment. He saves over 65 people's lives by himself. He's avoiding the Japanese that are patrolling while saving wounded soldiers and carrying them to safety. What's crazy is he lowers them down the 400-foot cliff by himself, which, I mean, you think about, he builds kind of a pulley system with a rope to lower himself down. And he ends up going back up the hill again when they try and take it. And they go to try and take the hill. And he is actually wounded, which is crazy. He gets shot in the leg, I believe. And they're carrying him out on a stretcher. And he sees a guy who's more wounded than him. He jumps off the stretcher, and I'm saying jump metaphorically. But he rolls off the stretcher, tells them, no, carry that guy, I'm fine. He gets shot again, hit with a grenade, and basically takes a rifle butt. It's the only time he touched a gun, and tied the stock to his leg to make a splint, and he crawled over 300 yards under enemy fire to get back to the escarpment, and they gets lowered down to safety. Credible story. He receives the Medal of Honor, the Congressional Medal of Honor, for his bravery and his call above and beyond the duty. The movie misses a couple of parts. Obviously, they hype up Andrew Garfield as the character, and obviously he did a lot better at this than he was as Spider-Man. No offense, Andrew Garfield. But there are a couple of things, like it doesn't show in detail the multiple scenes in the battle. It kind of just shows one battle, and then he goes back up one more time and basically just gets hit. But he tries to kick a grenade away, which I believe is true, but it doesn't show his other wounds and things like that. So that got to be my all-time favorite history movie. Parker, you are on, sir.
All right. Mine, ironically, thinking about this, I picked a movie called Last of the Mohicans, which was released in 1992, before a lot of our viewers were born. Yeah, I was a little bit old. What was I? In 92, I would have been 7. I didn't see it when I was 7. I probably saw it when I was 10. Again, a very eclectic movie library at our home. And so if you're not familiar, Last of the Mohicans is actually based on a book that was written in like 1826 about events in 1757, which is in the middle of the French and Indian War, or the 7 Years' War. This is just a movie that has stuck with me. Like, I enjoy the music, I enjoy watching it, and the book is actually historical fiction. The places are real, some of the events are real, some of the characters are historical people, and then there's some liberties that are taken. But this film did a great job of showing the French and Indian War, which is a war that is, or a time period in American history that is largely not put to film. Right? There's a lot of Civil War stuff, a lot of World War stuff. There's not really a ton of Revolutionary War or pre-revolutionary, material being made.
That's accurate.
And I think part of that is that we want to keep the founding fathers, kind of like deified and not touch them, like screw that up and make people angry. And so you follow Nathaniel Poe, also called Hawkeye, who's played by Daniel Day-Lewis right there, before he was in Gangs of New York.
And Lincoln.
Yeah, and Lincoln. A lot of other good movies. Daniel Day-Lewis is a good actor.
He did great.
But he plays an orphaned colonist who is raised by a Mohican, who his adopted father's name is Chingachgook, and his adopted brother's name is Uncas. And one of the most interesting things about this film is that all of the main characters are like outside of Daniel Day-Lewis, like the Native American characters around him are played by Native Americans, but they are Native American. Like his adopted brother, the actor that plays Uncas, is Inuit, so he's a First Nations person from the north. He was born in the Northwest Territory of Canada. His dad, the guy that plays Chingachgook, is Oglala Lakota, and then the main kind of villain and antagonist is a Huron warrior named Magua, who's played by Wes Studi, who's actually Cherokee. But they're supposed to be depicting, Mohicans and Hurons. None of them are the correct, kind of tribe, because the populations are so decimated by now and diluted that it's hard to find actors in all these specific areas. But one of the things that's really neat about this film is that it shows kind of, Native Americans having agency and being able to come in, and they were power brokers during the French and Indian War. That's what's called the French and Indian War. The Native American tribes played a large part in how this conflict was resolved. And you kind of see, you have Hawkeye, and the funny thing, in the actual book, his name was Natty Bumppo, and they changed it to Nathaniel Poe. Who knows why, right? So the main part of the story is that Daniel Day-Lewis and his adopted family essentially end up kind of happening across the daughters of this British commander as they're supposed to march from Albany to Fort William Henry. It all takes place in upstate New York, which they all filmed in North Carolina, but we'll pretend that it's upstate New York. It is what it is.
Semantics.
But and so Hawkeye falls in love with one sister, and then his brother Uncas falls in love with the younger sister. So it's kind of a romance movie at the same time as it's a rated R war movie. They get to Fort William Henry, which is a real fort. It was really there. It was on the bottom, the south end of Lake George, where you would have had to portage your ships and travel across land at that point, because it's connected to Lake Champlain, which Lake Champlain goes up all the way to the St. Lawrence. And then, anyway, the Hudson goes near there, but the Hudson doesn't actually connect with those two lakes. And another connection it has for me is that in my master's program, I wrote about a battle outside of Fort Carleon, which Fort Carleon later becomes Fort Ticonderoga. Fort Ticonderoga is at the bottom of Lake Champlain, where Lake Champlain meets Lake George. Yeah. So it's at the kind of a confluence of those two lakes. And so, like, I've done more academic research to like this area, and it was all pre-being the United States. And seeing that kind of put to film is just great. And there's something about it. He's running around, he's got a musket and a tomahawk and all that good stuff, and it brings to light that there were often orphaned colonists that would be adopted, sometimes kidnapped, but other times adopted into the tribe and would be made into like an equal member of the tribe, and could move forward that way. And so it kind of brings to light like one of those narratives that we don't see a whole lot. And it's got that great moving music to it. And the end features one of the most epic duels. And I can't even Chingachgook fights with a gunstock war club. So if you imagine a gunstock and put a giant spike in the middle of it, that's what he fights with. And it's a real historical thing. Like, you look at it and you see it in the movie and you're like, what? I've never seen this before. But it was actually something that was used. It's not shown very much in American, film culture. And they made it in 92. And a shout out to the Pacific War YouTube channel who did a review of this. It's a guy from Quebec. And he was talking about how in the film they let Wes Studi speak Cherokee when he was speaking, he's supposed to be speaking Huron.
Yeah.
And then other times he speaks with it's Mohawk, or the name they have for it, the proper name is like Kananagea, which I had to ask the Pacific War channel to be like, could you spell that for me? Because it was like, we can't subtitle this.
Yeah.
And so that is actually the group of, what's interesting is that a lot of native tribes in America have been pushed into Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
And so like a lot of the Great Lakes tribes that used to be up there like the Huron and like the Wyandot, like their confederacy got pushed into Oklahoma eventually, and then the northern half of it is still in Quebec, which is very much closer to where they should be.
They're native,
geographically speaking, right? Their ancestral lands. And so there's actually a movement up there to kind of keep this language going. And so Wes Studi actually speaks a mixture of Kanandaigea and Cherokee in the film. And then the actors that are playing the Mohicans speak a mixture of Delaware and Lenape, because that's the closest thing that they could find. So it's really interesting because I'm talking with my students right now about how there's certain parts of history that we've lost, languages that have died, people that have died, and these stories that have died. And so like these people tried to put to film, about these tribes, and it's really kind of nebulous of who the actual author was talking about when he said the Mohicans, because people in the early 1820s didn't have a great grasp of which tribes were which. Mm-hmm. Kind of a deal. And so we kind of wrote this big nebulous thing. And so they're trying to be as appropriate as possible. And rather than just making them like speak like gobbledygook, like making something up, they actually went out and found like First Nations people and said like, what's the closest thing we can actually put into this film? So, and it does have it's not a perfect historical film either. After the surrender of Fort William Henry, # spoilers, they take the girls to meet their father, who's a Scottish, kind of a Scottish British officer there. There's no irony there. But girls, why have you come here? And anyway, it shows the French, and the French are digging trenches to the fort, and they're going to get, if they get within 200 yards, they can use the 15-pounder mortars, and they can lob their mortars over our walls and pound us to dust. And so they surrender, and they show the Marquis de Montcalm, who is the French commander, and a
real person.
Yes, and they show him in the film, essentially telling telling Magua, who is a Huron, who is kind of like a stand-in for an entire, like, they dumb it down for the American audience, like for the audience where they're like, it's the Mohicans and the Hurons, when in reality it was like the Iroquois Confederacy with the British, and then like I think either the Wyandots or like I can't remember what the other confederacy is, but like one of the other confederacies that was competing with the Iroquois in the Northeast, and shows him talk with Magua, and he's like, oh, like when we bring them out of the fort, like slaughter them. And there was the Native American, like the Native allies were actually told by the French, because the French commander, the Marquis de Montcalm, like actually hated the French colonials, and he hated Native Americans even worse than that, because he was an aristocrat, right? He was one of those prissy, only gentlemen fight war, and he made a deal with Colonel Monroe to bring the soldiers out and to march them to Fort William Henry to Fort Edward, which is like 10 miles away down on the Hudson. And they couldn't fight for like 180 days or something like that. And they could take their guns, but they couldn't take any ammo, and they could take one symbolic cannon. Again, very much the era of the time period, like very much in the time period. And in the film, it shows like, everybody's getting wiped out and they've got to run away. And so that's one of the biggest historical inaccuracies there. And it paints the Marquis de Montcalm as like facilitating it, when in reality he was completely against it. The French tried to get it to stop. The majority of the people who were victimized were colonials or allied Native American soldier, or auxiliaries to the British. It wasn't the actual British who were accosted in the event. But anyway, it's a great film. One of the most epic fight scenes at the end.
The end, incredible.
Yeah, sorry, Scott. I may or may not have showed a video clip at one point of this amazingness, but just really brings to light a time period in U.S. history that we usually don't talk about a lot. And it's inspired me to learn more about that area, being from Washington State and not being from somewhere that has a really cool old history like New York does, that spans back, with the Dutch and then to the English, holding off the French, where out here we don't have as much of that kind of provenance.
54-40 or fight.
Yeah. But anyway, like I highly recommend Last of the Mohicans. Great music by Oh, Trevor something. I can't remember his name, but the composer's really good. Has a great song called "I Will Follow," or yeah, I will find you by Clannad, which is an Irish band, and then The Gale, which is a kind of the theme of the movie that's very moving as well. But it does a great job of showing like warfare of the time period. It is a little outdated, like it shows the British not knowing how to fight against Native Americans using non-European tactics, which at that time, 3 years into the 7 Years' War, they would have adapted and been more adept at handling fighting in the woods instead of lining up and the other guys going, let's hide behind something.
Yeah. Did you hear that, Trevor Jones?
Trevor Jones, yeah. It won an Academy Award, I think, for sound. So I don't know if that's not music, but great film. Great film. Tries to, I really appreciate that they try and do justice that way to the natives, and it shows kind of the plight and the complexity of having a colonial government, right? Britain, the colonizer, the colonial people trying to advocate for themselves, and the Native Americans. And it shows that Native Americans aren't homogenous, right? It kind of gets into the fact that one of the reasons that, they pick sides in a lot of these conflicts, even in the Civil War, right? There were Native tribes in the Southeast that helped and fought with the Confederate, fought on the side of the Confederacy.
Yep.
And that did not work out too well for them.
No.
But, it's always something that happens. Just like when the Spaniards arrived in Mexico, before Mexico was Mexico.
Yep.
To fight the Aztecs, they allied with the Tlaxcala to get them, because they're like, well, you guys aren't in power. Those guys are in power. Those guys suck. Let's go kill them. And they were like, yeah, that sounds good to us. Until they realized the Spaniards were just going to kind of kill everybody.
Enslave them too. So, fun fact. The other one, I will throw this out there. I threw out my honorable mention and I threw out Miracle because when Barker texted me, my first thought went to military history. That's where I went with this topic, and you can tell by my choice in the movie, right? It was a military history movie. And so that's why I was like, well, there's sports movies, there's, different biopics and different things like that. Another movie that I will highly recommend if you are old enough to watch it, it's rated R, but a star-studded cast, is Glory, about the 54th Massachusetts Regiment during the Civil War. It's an all-black regiment with white officers. But it stars Matthew Broderick, Denzel Washington, Morgan Freeman, and who's the other guy I'm thinking of? There's another big one, isn't there? Is it just those three?
You say Matthew Broderick?
I did.
Because he's the commander.
Yep. Morgan Freeman becomes the first sergeant, and
Denzel Washington is the stubborn one.
Yep.
The outspoken one. There's somebody else, but I can't think of who it is off the top of my head.
Our apologies, but Glory, great film, totally worth the watch. The ending also very good, and historically accurate, surprising. So. But yeah, no, it's really fun topic to talk about, really fun to think about. I had trouble posting last time, so hopefully this will get posted and we'll get it up and running tomorrow, and everything like that. But we appreciate your time. We hope that you're staying safe, and, this election season isn't too bad for you. I did read an article the other day that said, win or lose based on your political beliefs, have a self-care plan in place just to take care of yourself mentally and stuff like that, because we're in tough times, and so these election results, whether you like them or you don't, can also be more trying on our emotions. So make sure that you're ready, kind of, and you're looking to support yourself. So Barker, anything?
Voter turnout is looking like it's on pace to be at a record high in Washington State. Grant County, though, however, had an article the other day saying that they were pretty low in voter turnout. So all y'all Grant County people, get your ballots in the box. But I couldn't see ones for Cowlitz County, but they're saying that a lot of, I think even King County at this point, we're a week out, they already have 60% of their ballots in. People have submitted their ballots, which is just great. That's the way it should be, right? It shouldn't be hard to vote. It should be easy to vote. Get it done, get it in the mail, or put it in the box, right? I checked mine. My dad, very adamant to know that his is being counted.
Yep. I checked mine. I dropped mine in the box on Monday, and mine was counted. I made sure I checked mine today, and it was counted. So, So again, and make sure it's vote WA. If you type in vote WA, it'll pop up on Google, and you can check your ballot status. So if you sent your ballot in, you can check to see that, make sure it got accepted. And if it didn't get accepted, you can work on requesting a new ballot or figuring out what the problem was. So
make sure you're using Vote WA, which is the official Secretary of State of Washington, to check. There's another one floating around out there that's not official, where a lot of people are posting on Facebook going, hey, check and make sure your ballot got cleared. It's like voterinfo.something.
Yeah, no.
That one is not from the state government and is not official. And I believe Kim Wyman put out a statement today saying there's no way that we're rejecting ballots even yet. So the names that are appearing on this list, like, it shouldn't matter. Like, check with the state of Washington.
Yep.
Right. So go to vote.wa to check your ballot status. Don't trust a third party website. You can vote third party. You can trust a third party political party, but just don't trust a third party website when it comes to what the status of your ballot is.
Correct.
So that's the other thing that they're saying to be careful of, ladies and gents, is misinformation. Election results are going to be slower this election cycle. There's a lot of states. Washington is very familiar with mail-in voting. We're very good at it. Kim Wyman has been our Secretary of State for a number of years, and things have run very smoothly with little to very, 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 very limited, very small, minute, if at all, voter fraud. Mm-hmm. Like, it's not a thing.
Yep.
Right? In Washington State, we were good at this. Other states
are new to this.
They're making the transition. They're new to it. It's going to take time for them to count. Yep. So we just have to, that's another thing about election night, is that it's not going to be sit down with a bowl of popcorn and you'll know who the next president is by the end of the night, and then I'm not even going to get into the.
But feel free to have your bowl of popcorn. I prefer a little Tapatio on mine. And enjoy. I mean, like, sit back and watch. I mean, the country's going to change in some way, shape, or form, right? Even if the same people are elected to power, it's still going to look different. And yeah, I mean, living in great times, take care of yourself, reach out to people you need. DBJ, if the man couldn't say it himself, he would say it too. But yeah, it's one of those ones where, just, we're going to be okay. And if you really feel upset, put your Christmas tree up, or your menorah, or your Kwanzaa wreath, or, well, I mean, you put up a tree for pagan holidays too. Whatever you need to do. So, because it's as Bob Dylan said, the times they are changing. So, until next time, I'm the Turn.
I'm the Bark.
And we're going to be here a long time. Good night, everybody.
Be safe.
And be well.